Hey, welcome back to class. I want to give a brief example of a detailed observation. And I want to look at Psalm 1:1 because it's pretty memorable and I think it's fairly straightforward, just to give you a couple of more ideas of what a detailed observation looks like. I'm going to abbreviate what I write up here simply for the sake of time. But let's read the text, and I'm going to read out the NIV, and I'm also going to bring in the NRSV also, because I think that's important to do that. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of mockers. So notice right up front that this text is written in the third person singular, right? And so we can observe that it's focusing on, at least it seems like, an individual. Our text uses the word man. And by the way, if you know Hebrew, this is a place where it actually is the Hebrew word for male over against female. Again, we'll see what that might mean if we would do a deeper dive. But this text focuses on an individual, so that we could make that observation. You think, well, that seems to be pretty simplistic. But remember, detailed observation in some way is stating the obvious, because sometimes the obvious isn't so obvious, and we make biblical studies about having these mysterious interpretations and these secret codes, when in fact, if you just observe, pay attention, move slowly through the text, what the text is trying to say becomes pretty clear. So let's just note, like, what should we do with the questions? And we want to ask three questions, right? We want to ask a definitional. What is the meaning of the focus on an individual? Why does the text focus on an individual, and what are the full implications? Or you might also observe if, in fact, we can make a note here and just ask the question. It says man, it doesn't say woman, for example. And so, like, what's the meaning of this? Is this truly sex-specific language? Why would this be sex-specific language if, in fact, it is? We don't know that yet. We need to look in that and research it. And then what are the implications, right? That's another thing. Now, we also notice that there's three basic verbs here, right? We have walk, stand, and sit. And an observation that we can make of those verbs would be these pretty much entail the options of when one is awake, right? I mean, you might have run or something like that, but it's basically, if you're awake, you're either walking, you're standing, or you're sitting. So what is the precise and specific meaning of each of these verbs? Why does the psalmist use this type of language, walk, stand, sit? What are the full implications? Also can note that we have three phrases about what this relates to, right? And we can start off with, there seems to be focusing on what the righteous, or what the blessed person doesn't do. So this is these are negative examples, right? It's a person, the blessed is the person who does not walk, does not stand, does not sit. What is the meaning of the use of the negative? Why does the psalmist use the negative? What are the full implications? Then we have, just like we have lots of threes here, right? So we have this phrase walk, stand, sit, or does not, negative, and we have the counsel of the wicked, the way of sinners, the seat of mockers, right? And so we have, again, three markers of groups of people that should be avoided. So the focus seems to be on who to avoid, right? And we can lay out those things. So we have sinners, or wicked, sinners, and mockers. what's the meaning of each of these categories? Why does this individual, this blessed person, avoid such persons? What are the full implications? Now, we also have other descriptors of who to avoid. We also have the context, right? And so we're also avoiding kind of the what of avoiding, right? Is counsel, the way, and the seat, right? These, again, just stating the obvious, but again, we want to ask some questions then, right? What is the meaning of counsel, of the way, of the seat? Why does the psalmist attach kind of the what and then also the who? Why does it connect those phrases? And then what are the full implications? Now, we also want to note that this psalm starts off with the expression, it's an exhortation, right? It starts off with the exhortation about being blessed, right? And I think it's important, and we want to know that this psalm uses Psalm 1, verse 1 seems to be a descriptor, right? This is about the blessed person, right? Blessed is the person, blessed is the man. And we want to ask ourselves, what is the precise and specific meaning of blessed? Why does the psalm open with this word blessed? And what are the full implications? Now, this is where we can bring in another translation also, because it's interesting. The NRSV starts, instead of blessed, it has happy. So this could be a whole nother observation then, right? So a definitional question would be, what is the difference of blessed versus happy? What's the meaning of happy over against blessed? Why does one translation use blessed and one does happy? And what are the full implications? And we also can note with the NRSV that instead of man, we have the phrase those. So notice this is now a plural. So like if we're just reading the NRSV, we have a plural, which again begs the question, what is involved in the NRSV and not in newer translations making it a plural over against older translations making it singular? We can make I already mentioned the Hebrew word here, but let's say we didn't know. So like, what is the tense of the Hebrew word underneath that? Why does, say, the NRSV make this a plural? Why does the NIV make it man? What are the full implications? So those are some kind of obvious things that we can make observations about. And again, notice, what did I do? I didn't write out the full observations for time, but if you go back and listen to the video, I actually could have written down specifically what I would have done for each of these, but then also note that I asked 3 types of questions. Some of these things are fairly obvious, but notice what we've already done. We've got a lot of data here, right? So we have this whole thing, it's focusing on the negative. And so we could also make another last, verse 1 defines the characteristic of the blessed man or the blessed persons in terms of what is avoided, right? So so what is the meaning of opening up with the language of avoidance? Why does Psalm 1 verse 1 start with the negative part, and what are the full implications? And again, I realize that's very similar to the 3, but just notice we're trying to pull that a little bit down. Now, if we were going to keep going, it's really interesting. Then what? Verse 2 starts off with the word but. And then in verse 2, we get the positive features of what this individual who's blessed or happy does, and we can continue this process. But no, I pretty quickly came up with 6 or 7 at least observations just off that initial verse, and we could probably go back and say something else. Let me make a structural observation real quick, actually. We can say that verse 1 is actually structured by negative particularization, right? We can start, blessed is the one, blessed is the man, blessed are those, however you decide to translate that ultimately, which we could figure out in interpretation. Well, what does that look like? We get 3 examples, right? So notice that that this moves from general statement about blessing, and the particulars are 3 negative examples, right? So the person who's blessed doesn't walk in the way of the wicked, doesn't stand in does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, does not stand in the way of sinners, does not sit in the seat of scoffers. If you have any questions, reach out to me, but this would be an example of a detailed observation. And the best way to get good at this is set your timer and don't give up until you've filled up the time with observations. Again, I'm Brian Russell, and it's my privilege to bring this instruction to you.